Hey everybody, welcome to Launch and Learn with Ignition. We're going to be talking today about retroing the future and looking at what go-to-market in 24 and beyond looks like. I'm joined here by Tim Hillison from Entry Point One. Tim, do you want to give a quick little intro on yourself? And excited to be chatting with you today.
Thanks, Derek. It's great to be here. My name's Tim Hillison. I'm the founder and CMO of Entry Point One. My background's product marketing, and I have 25 years of go-to-market experience, leading marketing 3 times on 2 continents and launching and running products and programs globally. Entry Point One accelerates growth for B2B SaaS and technology startups and scale-ups, and we help modern organizations increase their efficiency and effectiveness through agile methodologies, applied AI, and through the depth of our global marketing and go-to-market expertise.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm super excited to be jamming with you on this, Tim. I think, clearly you've got tons of experience with go-to-market. You've seen kind of what go-to-markets look like in recent years, how it's been evolving. I think you're going to have some killer insights into like what the future holds for this. So I guess to just kind of dig in first, talk to me a little bit about like what you feel like go-to-market has looked like over the last 5 to 10 years. How has it been what's the state of it been, in recent years?
Well, Derek, first of all, bringing products to market is challenging. The short answer to this is over the last 5 to 10 years, very few companies had deliberate GTM functions, owners, and defined motions, right? A good metaphor is like a tween that's becoming a teenager, right? And let's look at some of the numbers for context on this, right? In 2013, there were approximately 1,200 SaaS companies, right? Today, there's approximately 30,000. M&A activity dropped in 2013, still subdued in 2023. We did see a peak in 2021. Previously, a lot of GTM motions targeted one buyer. Now, a buying committee is commonplace. Oftentimes, motions are so complex and buying behavior has changed so much that we're seeing upwards of 13 people in the buying committee, right? And let's not forget that, it was just a short time ago that we all lived through the pandemic. And this really brought the full digital transformation to all of us, where even the laggards embraced digital, right? B2B is different. Now it's a thriving $14.26 trillion trillion dollar market. And the pace of technology adoption, right? I think that we were all stunned when Facebook reached 1 million users in 10 months, right? ChatGTP reached 1 million users in 5 days. So it's only getting faster. We feel it, and that overwhelm is real. Right. So the short answer to your question, Derek, is what did GTM processes look like over the last 5 to 10 years? It's a maturity curve, right? Simpler times, less competitive rivalry, less possibilities. And, another way to look at that is the MarTech stack had 350 solutions in 2014, has over 11,000 in 2023. Right? I mean, it's just purely amazing. So let's dive in a little bit to how it is different, though, right? And let's remember that, and maybe we can name some companies and just get into the state of it, right? Digital was a lot less connected, integrated, and it didn't provide that seamless experience. Between product and between the website, oftentimes these were separate experiences. You can think of even large players like Oracle, right? Where you would go into one. When Oracle bought Eloqua, for instance, you would have to log into one system for your marketing automation system, and yet log into another for the CRM or for the other types of products that you were using. People were using data, but it wasn't advanced analytics, right? Amazon was really the game in town, and they were using AI to make their recommendation engine better, right? But that was not widespread, certainly not as it is today. And, go-to-market teams, a lot of times, and for a lot of companies, could be defined by their sales and marketing teams, right? Only. And that has changed. Many times, sales and marketing were quite siloed in how they approached. And, another thing that comes to mind is content marketing was just emerging. Very few companies were blogging. Right now, there are so many different types of rich content assets out there, and how people interact with a company or a brand to educate and to entertain themselves about how to find out if the product is right for them.
Mhm.
Another thing is that account-based marketing was nascent, right? People were using marketing automation platforms and demand generation, lead generation programs a lot in B2B tech, right? And a spray and pray mentality was going on. And metrics were really very surface. They were vanity metrics. They weren't revenue metrics, right?
Mhm.
And then really, at the end of it too, believe it or not, in 2013, there was growing adoption of CRM, right? Whereas you talk to people nowadays that are in the workforce and you think, how could you survive without a CRM? And sometimes different players and different departments didn't even have access to it. So those are a few ways that go-to-market was different then than it is today.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that it's not really that long ago that there were, the majority of companies didn't even know what the letter CRM stood for. Not even just did they have one, they didn't even know what it meant. Yeah, it's funny. I think you touched on a couple of areas there that are pretty interesting. The TLDR of all of that sounds like it's gotten harder. It's gotten more complicated. It's gotten, there's like more competition in everything that you're doing. And I think, what's interesting about like that whole process that you just laid out is I think, I have an old blog post about this that, my view is that pre-internet, basically marketing and sales looked like a fairly like linear process. Everyone was kind of competing on the same like couple of channels. All the things that were really important were how well you actually like connected your product to the market and how well you actually had a cohesive strategic approach to the way that you were actually introducing, those new messages or new products to market. And I think, the way that you competed on a more competitive, narrow set of channels was better positioning, better messaging, better content, better creative. And then that like skill set kind of went away for a while because basically you had this big explosion of like everything everywhere all at once. And like all these things were happening and you basically had like new channels popping up left and right. You had big white spaces of, completely uncompetitive software categories that people were selling. And it was kind of just like the biggest skill set that was important was just go fast. And it was just be able to like do a lot of stuff and learn from it quickly. And so you basically had this big rise of like, growth marketing really driving the way that companies were operating because it was all just about like, hey, how do we get this message into as many places as possible and find as many little like technical arbitrage opportunities as we can on these channels. And I think like to your point, you're kind of seeing this like world now where everything is so competitive that and channels are even consolidating back to a few channels as like, for example, ad platforms consolidate into like two, major digital channels. And so, basically like now you're seeing companies like have to get back to those fundamentals in a way that they haven't had to before, where they actually do need to like now have really tight alignment between their product teams and their sales teams and their marketing teams. And they really do need to be able to like drive strategic motions instead of just like doing stuff.
Absolutely. It is really about going back to the fundamentals. And, one of the things we've heard so much is look at the B2C marketers, right? And then you look at the B2B marketers. One thing that is fundamental is the market research aspect, right? And knowing your customers to be able to develop defensible, competitive positioning and then messaging that comes out of that, right? And this is what we're seeing, right? Because we've seen a lot of companies go out of business because they've been Me Too. And there hasn't been a hook for customers to really get a real feel for what they are and what they do and why they should have customer preference.
Yep.
Right. And this also has to do with the lack of brand, right? Which has been a bad word for B2B CEOs, right? And those that have built brand have built that customer preference.
Yep. 100%. So I think we kind of talked a little bit about like how go-to-market's kind of evolved over the last like handful of years. Like, why do you think what do you think the biggest like break points are in, why like a lot of people, including like you and I in some of our past conversations, like feel like go-to-market, as a process is pretty like fundamentally broken these days. Like, and how do you feel like that's kind of impacting companies?
Well, there's a few stats that pop into mind when we talk about go-to-market being broken, right? One is based on the competitive rivalry, right? That about 90% of startups fail today, right? Secondly, that about 81% of companies say that sales velocity slowed during 2023, right? It's been a complex year, right? But to get to your point, let's really define what go-to-market means, right? For me, it's a unifying force for the business. It aligns processes and insights from product, marketing, sales, customer success, revenue ops, enablement, and orchestrates that repeatable, scalable process and way of doing business that adds direct value to the customer, right? So in essence, it's the path to market, but it's also creating that connected customer experience. And when you look at that definition, and when you look at how many companies go to market, there's a lot of pieces that aren't there, and that is one of the reasons it's broken. Double clicking on that, we've witnessed a lot of change in 2023, right? Well, really since the pandemic, right? We've been on a roller coaster. We've seen marketing teams liquidated. We've seen customer success teams wiped out. But there's a lot of opportunity in how we can prioritize, manage, and execute these go-to-market motions, specifically from the perspective of people, process, technology, data, and culture, right? And so when I think about why is it broken today, I think of several reasons, right? One is ownership. Some people say that product owns it. Other people say sales owns it. Other people say marketing owns it. For me, the CEO owns it. And if it's in a larger enterprise, a lot of times it's the, department head, right, that's owning it and taking it to market. There really is a top-down reason for why, and that alignment is important. The other thing is, a lot of times in different companies, it relies on sales heroics, right? Not repeatable sales plays, right? And this is what builds revenue. Again, one of the things we talked about previously is just the alignment piece, right? So, making sure that there is a culture of cross-functional collaboration. If silos exist within the organization, really things aren't going to get done because, again, launching products to market is complex and a lot gets broken. And when people are not communicating and understanding what is launching, when, where, why, how, things are going to get lost. And that's going to create a confusing customer experience. And lastly, I would say, recently I read a stat, 77% of B2B customers are changing projects or products, and it's because it didn't meet their expectations. And so you've got increased churn. And so I think that one thing that we've seen in 2023 is the importance of net revenue retention, right? We know it's easier to retain a customer than to acquire a new one. This is where customer success really has been stepping up and where we need to empower them so that we're working across the entire revenue team.
Yep. Yeah. It's I think for me, this all kind of boils down to like your first point, which is you want to create a consistent customer experience, which means having like consistent thematic narratives at specific points that they can digest, that they can easily understand. And that all starts with like having a consistent internal process. that has a consistent experience around whatever that new thing that you're introducing is. And I think this is where, like, when you actually start to silo these teams, both in their processes, their tools, their operating motions, the way that they communicate, it ends up creating that dysfunction that is outwardly customer facing, because one team's telling one story, another team's telling another story. They're telling it at different times. They don't know how loudly they should be telling each of those different stories relative to each other. So it really boils down to, like, companies have basically gradually started siloing themselves more and more and more. And, like, product has, I talk to mostly product and marketing teams all day, every day. And product is gradually getting closer and closer to engineering, and they're only thinking about, like, actually building product. Marketing is gradually getting closer and closer to the channel activity that they're doing, and they're only thinking about the external facing promotion. And there's a big gap in the middle where, like, nobody's really talking to each other. And then sales is obviously, like, always talking to, they're always customer facing, and they're always, like, really, really close on that end. And nobody's really connecting the dots in the middle. And so all three teams are kind of operating on, like, completely different playbooks relative to each other. But I guess, like, a lot of this stuff is changing recently too. Like, you have like 2023 and 2024. It feels like a lot of stuff has changed, right? It feels like in the last 2 or 3 years, especially, like, since COVID, but, like, even just in the couple of years, like, after COVID, everything's changed quite a bit. There's, like, many companies are reorging and changing the structure of their go-to-market organizations altogether. You were kind of talking about, like, you're seeing marketing and success teams, like, in many cases, getting wiped out, and teams are really, like, changing the way that they think about going to market. Like, what do you think are some of the, like, biggest drivers, and, like, why and how companies are kind of reassessing those processes today?
Well, there's a few, but I think that one of there's, just to be, the short answer is missed revenue targets, elongated sales cycles, increased cost of sales, and inability to execute, right? Due to layoffs, right? We experienced all these layoffs, about, 250,000 tech workers. Yesterday, Spotify just laid off 1,500 workers, and they cited the cost of money. Right. And so again, one of the things that we talked about was this launch often and fix from Facebook that we, in the 2016, 2017, that we talked a lot about. Now it's really not about that. Now it's about, aligning, getting it done well, and executing well to the market. And this has to do with, again, the competitive rivalry that's out there. And then one of the points that you mentioned was, a lot of companies have undifferentiated POVs, and it's because they are talking, you ask 3 different people, right? And they tell you 3 different stories. And, harmonizing this strategic narrative and telling to the customer so that they can really understand the value that they're going to get is very important these days, because that is what they're buying, and that is the value that they want, right? And another thing I would say is, whereas people would just buy these solutions previously, what we've seen this year is a lot of people deprecating their tech stacks and going down to systems that interconnect these different departments, and getting away from vertical solutions that just serve marketing or just serve sales, but that serve them both. Right? A good example of this is Slack. Everyone's on Slack, right? However, if you really need to find something, good luck.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, we talk a lot at Ignition about, kind of the vertical versus horizontal problem that companies have. And, you need the vertical tooling that helps to automate some of the critical, like, work involved, but you need the horizontal nature of a tool like Slack, or, free-form project management tools, or docs, or spreadsheets, because everybody needs to be able to use it. They need to have access to it. They also need to understand how it relates to their role. And so, like, I think a lot of what we've been doing with Ignition is, we try and marry the best of both worlds there, where we actually build vertical tools per department, but those vertical tools are integrated into kind of a holistic platform that serves these cross-functional teams in ways that they understand how to interact with, and also deliver value to each of them independently while still interconnecting all the context and information that's needed to bring something to market. So I think you're spot on. Like there's a lot of this change going on at the tool level as well as at the kind of like organizational process level.
One thing I would say too, Derek, is that, when we look at what are some of the biggest drivers, there's newer motions that we're seeing that are happening as well. Previously we saw a lot of sales led, we saw a lot of product led. Just because we saw a lot of product led doesn't mean that it was actually right for each company that was using it. But, we still have a lot of marketing led, or this inbound where content marketing is driving a lot of conversions. We still see, the sales led ABM going out, right? We see a partner led growth model, right? The movement of nearbound coming out, where people are activating their ecosystems and their channel partners and their resellers and affiliates, right? People that are like them within their space, where they can have adjacencies and synergies, right? There's an event led. A lot of people have had customer advisory boards or these large customer meetings. This is a great way for conversions, right? And this is a go-to-market motion that makes a lot of sense for a lot of companies. And then I would say, one of the things that we've really seen take on its own is a community led. Right. One thing that we've noticed a lot is customer behavior change, right? Over the last few years, we've seen companies use relevant personalities, i.e. creators or influencers, to be the face of their brand so that they can really build strong relationships with their target relevant market. People like them, because at the end of the day, people do business with people, right? And it's not just a product, but people want to buy a way of working or a lifestyle, right? And that type of affinity we're seeing is growing. And then finally, I would be remiss if I did not tell you, customer acquisition cost is up 50%. Right.
Yep.
And so that is a huge driver to GTM operating motion change in 2023 and 2024.
It's really funny. I feel like every year that I have been a marketer, customer acquisition costs have been up, somewhere between 10 to 50% every year. And I don't know how anybody can afford to acquire customers anymore. And it's pretty funny, because I feel like that's surprising in a world where there's more and more people, and theoretically you think that markets are expanding, so acquiring customers should kind of progress in terms of cost, aligned with that market expansion, but it just doesn't seem like it happens that way.
But that's exactly why we're seeing these new go-to-market models, because community and partner-led growth are part and parcel of reducing customer acquisition cost. Right. And so, it's not just the traditional motions that they're doing. However, what you mentioned previously about the fundamentals, having that right, positioning and the messaging within your market, those are still equally as important. And, that ecosystem that you're creating needs to be educated so that others can sell your product and bring them in for that cross-pollination.
Yep. Well, so let's talk a little bit about moving to the future a bit. So let's look ahead. I think like retroing the past gives us some really interesting insights, and there's lots of stuff that we can learn from things that we all did wrong over the last 10 years or so of this. But what do you think? Where do you think all this shakes out? Like, what do you think like go-to-market looks like in 2024 and beyond? And like how do you think companies are going to adapt to that new world?
Derek, that's a great question. I am thinking, I've talked about 60 CEOs, CFOs, and CMOs over the last 2 months. And this is where I've sort of netted out. Here's 4 different things, right? Efficiency was the word for 2023. According to Gartner, 71% of CMOs said that they did not have enough budget to successfully execute their strategic growth objectives, right? 2024 is about being effective, right? Not only do GTM teams have to do more with less, right? But they also have to prioritize and focus on the right initiatives, from repositioning, increasing the depth of their messaging, targeting the right accounts, and building the right partnerships, right? Um, Another thing that I think that we're going to see happen a lot that you mentioned is the alignment. LinkedIn launched their global B2B benchmark survey in 2023, and it stated that really only 16% of sales and marketing are targeting the same buyers. Think about that. I mean, that is crazy, right? And so that alignment is so crucial in having a go-to-market motion that not only is efficient, but effective in creating that revenue that you want. And what plays a big part there is enablement and RevOps, right? Next, I think that we're going to start seeing unified revenue teams, right? I don't think that we're going to keep seeing marketing contributed pipeline, AE pipeline, SDR pipeline. I think that we're going to see pipeline, and then there'll be separate teams that are there, but they're going to need to be unified in how they tackle that, because different teams provide different value adds to move the pipeline forward. And again, it's about cross collaboration, it's about cross functionality, and it's about execution. And then finally, again, if I didn't mention this, it would be a big miss, right? Is the use of AI. We're all using AI, but there was a huge paper, I'm sure you read it, called The Jagged Technological Frontier by Harvard, Wharton, MIT, and BCG. And basically what they did is they surveyed a bunch of BCG consultants on these very complex tasks, and they measured them using AI, and there was huge productivity gains. So what does that tell us? Because we're all using AI, right? It tells us that, first of all, how you apply it really matters, right? Also, your knowledge of the process and what the desired objective is matters too. And so, to have that right team composition there, and to apply it to the right processes to get the right outputs, and to have a human in the mix to be able to verify that that output is right for your company is going to be really important, right? So a lot of people are using AI for content production. Well, we've all got opinions on that. However, how it's used for market research, how it's used for competitive, how it's used for feature function analysis, right? These are things that we're going to see come into the mainstream in 2024, and they are going to make our lives a lot more productive, because there is so much data out there. They're going to help us simplify and take decisions better and faster.
Yep. 100%. I mean, I think the point that you made about unified revenue teams is interesting, because I mean, one of my favorite things that the GTM partners guys are always shouting is, like, look, you don't have a marketing problem, you don't have a sales problem, you don't have a product problem, you have a go-to-market problem. And I think that's the right way to think about it. And you're seeing a lot of companies that are starting to actually, like, it's not even unified revenue teams, it's unified, like, go-to-market teams inclusive of product. And I think, that's where, like, PLG is kind of like a fancy name they got slapped onto a motion that is really just bringing product and marketing a little bit closer together. I think, like, a lot of companies, like, I mean, Apple's been doing this for forever. PlayStation's been doing this for forever. They did it when I was there. And, like, I think you're starting to see a lot of companies like Airbnb, start to adopt this motion where, it's like product and product marketing are, like, functionally one role, because these companies are trying to unify the way that they think about the things that they build and the way that they sell the things that they build. And so you have, I mean, the stat around, like, sales and marketing alignment is crazy, that 16% of them are targeting the same account. But you have that same problem on the product and marketing side too. It's like, I think you would, if you go talk to a bunch of marketing teams out there and you go talk to a bunch of product teams, they're going to give you wildly different answers about, like, who they're building for, why they're building the things that they're building, and, like, how they're actually, what their go-to-market motion looks like on those things. And so, I think the big change in 2024 and beyond is that companies are just generally trying to ditch the siloed process that they've been following today and move to a much more centralized, unified process, which involves in many cases like changing their workflow, changing their tool stacks. And I mean, part of that's also a reaction against all the SaaS that companies bought when budgets were just free flowing, where they just bought a bunch of point solutions. And so you're seeing teams trying to consolidate tooling, even just from a cost perspective, but they're trying to do that in parallel to like consolidating their workflows as well. So I definitely agree with all of your points. I think this is going to be like the future of go-to-market is going to look much, much more like there's one central owner. It's being driven as a unified process across all of these different teams where there's like clear visibility across party lines, within companies. And it starts to just be a much more like streamlined process as opposed to, companies basically operating as marketing and sales and et cetera, et cetera. It's like everybody needs to function as one team pulling in the same direction.
One thing that I would say that I don't think it's going to happen in 2024, but we're close to it, is I think that we're going to see new compensation and incentive models for these revenue teams as a result to bring them closer together. Again, I don't think that that's going to happen quite yet in 2024, but there'll be some testing of that. And that'll be very interesting to bring teams together to be able to deliver that value for customers.
Yep. Incentives make the world go around. It's how you make everybody work the way that you want them to work. So I definitely agree. I think you're going to see some interesting incentive models start to pop up, that like align those teams better. And I mean, it's one thing that I've had a bit of a bugbear about for a long time when it comes to marketing is like marketing is never incentivized with, like variable comp relative to them actually driving pipeline. And so they end up inevitably looking like a cost center, despite the fact that they are arguably as much, if not more, of a revenue center than some of the other like teams on the revenue team because they're generating the top of the funnel. So I think
it depends. I mean, at some mid-market and enterprise companies, it really depends on the leader, and you do have that incentive out there, but it is lumpy.
Yeah. It's just rare. I think it does exist, but it's and when it is set up, like I feel like it's not even usually set up effectively, but I know we're coming pretty close to time here, so let's just wrap up with like one last topic, which is like how do teams think about like preparing for that new world? I think we kind of touched on this a little bit on the last question, but like how should they be thinking about like setting themselves up for success like heading into 2024?
I think that there's three things, Derek. I'm going to start with process, okay? And that is sharing a common nomenclature. I think that when people speak the same language, they're able to communicate better and more transparently. One of the reasons that you could say that GTM is so broken is because people are talking different languages, right? And metrics, right? Simplifying this process is going to help them play better together. Right. It's also going to help them extend their success when they use different motions, such as community-led or partner-led growth. Right. The other thing is the tools that you're talking about. Right. We've seen the deprecation of a lot of technology, whether due to acquisition or just for cost cutting. I believe that shared tools across GTM and revenue teams are really going to start taking precedence, right? These are tools that serve sales, product, marketing, customer success, revenue operations, and enablement, right? Where they're able to go in there and they're able to say, here is the project plan, here is the launch schedule, and they're not having to wait for someone to provide them with that information, right? And then in regards to a mind shift, it's no longer, again, about the sales team or the marketing team, but it's about the go-to-market team, right? And I think that we're going to, again, what I mentioned before, I think that these incentives, you're going to start seeing the most innovative companies change their leadership and change their team structure in a way that really compensates go-to-market success, because that is the revenue success for the company.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I think you're going to see shifts across the board here. I mean, obviously, like as at Ignition, we're biased, and we feel like the biggest shift that you're going to see is people starting to actually adopt kind of dedicated platforms for this commercialization process that help to give those teams kind of the tools that they need each individually, and then connect all of that together. So, our that's our big bet towards the future. But I think from a process perspective, I think you nailed it, across the board there. And from a mindset shift perspective, like, it's interesting because the mindset shift is actually married to the process shift, and you end up having to also adjust incentive plans, also adjust the way that like teams are even structured in order to be able to support this. So, totally agree. And I mean, Tim, it's been a pleasure. I think you've brought some incredible insights here. I think we're all excited about like heading into 2024. What go to market's going to be looking ahead, and I'm really excited to have had the chance to jam with you. So thank you for joining.
Thank you, Derek. It was great to be here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, looking forward. If people want to reach out and get in touch about Entry Point One, where can they find you?
They can go to my web address at entrypoint1.com. That is the number one, or they can email me at tim@entrypoint1.com.
Perfect. Well, super excited. Thank you for having me. And yeah, if you're looking for go to market help, reach out to Tim. He's an expert. So thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you very much, Derek. Happy holidays.